Hey, what's up everyone? Mekkah here. Welcome back to the Fire Emblem biggest tier list, the biggest tier list that you've ever seen probably. So today we're tiering some FE2 Gaiden all the way up to FE6, the Binding Blade. I'm going to tier every single Fire Emblem character eventually on this big elitist tier list, but my Patreons get to decide who goes first. So if you want to support me on Patreon, link is in the description. Thanks a lot. Every Patreon that I already have or that already has pledged to me, thank you so much. I sometimes have myself taking your support for granted, but I really do appreciate all the help I've gotten so far and every bit of help I'm going to receive in the future. But, you know, don't do it if you can't afford it. If you got to leave or if you can't join, no problem. Just watch my videos and have fun. Anyway, let's start off with Gaiden. We have 2 units submitted, both of them by Boots42. He has given us the blessings to use Est and Atlas as our next guinea pigs for the Gaiden tier list. We have quite a few Gaiden characters left after this too, so this one is not going away for a while. Est, I have used her in Echoes actually. I wasn't expecting to, but I then just ended up doing it somehow and I had a good time. I never used her in Gaiden unfortunately, but I know roughly how good she would be, if that makes any sense, considering Echoes and Gaiden are very similar in a lot of ways, and it's a very faithful remake in a lot of ways. One big difference that comes to mind for me when it comes to like Gaiden versus Echoes is in Gaiden, the bonus that Pegasus Knights or Falcon Knights get, like the promoted version of Est basically, when they're fighting like monsters and terrorists is bigger. And I believe it just like multiplies your attack power instead of just a +10 flat bonus that you get in Echoes. So that makes her better as like an endgame candidate, I feel like, because you do fight a lot of terror-like enemies in Act 4 and 5. So in that way, I think Gaiden Est is actually better than Echoes Est. I know by a whole lot. I don't remember what I tiered her like in Echoes. So I might just end up like, you know, inserting my foot into my mouth here. But I feel like she's better potential. She's still obviously underleveled and kind of bad at base level and everything. So that has to be taken into account. I don't think I can reasonably put her like over these characters in C. So I'm thinking she's either a low C or a high D. Obviously her long-term potential is better than Bowie's. Bowie just has more free utility. I do think she's better than Foresight overall, just because she has some level of potential, and I think Gaiden Echoes implies some level of grinding, so it might not even take that many turns, or time, or effort, or whatever, to make her good. But I do remember it's like pretty hard to feed her kills early on, because she doesn't start with the monster damage bonus. You give it a Blessed Lance, but I don't think there's a whole lot of extra damage for her, and it's probably not worth it per se, but it's there's something that comes out of it, I guess. So I'm feeling like high D is probably good for her. As for Atlas, I also had a lot of fun using Atlas in Echoes, but I think in Echoes he is a lot better because Hunter's Volley, that's basically the whole thing. The Hunter's Volley and Killer Bow and being able to forge that is a huge boon to archers. Of course, like Atlas is a villager, but in Echoes it just feels like if you make him anything but an archer or maybe a sage, you're probably missing out on something. I've heard of people recommending that you make Atlas like a cavalier because it's the only cavalier in Celica. She does lack mounted units, but I don't think there's really a good point for that because every map in Celica's Act 3 penalizes cavaliers in some way, I feel like, with desert and swamps, or Act 3 and 4 basically. Celica Route has all the bad maps, so I don't think there's any point in making him a cavalier because the stats are worse and your movement advantage just ends up being completely negated. I think he's better off as an archer or a mage, or excuse me, something like that. I'm not sure what the meta choice is for him in Gaiden. Obviously, it's tempting to just go Merc and say, alright, Mercenary and Dread Fighter and everything, they're the best class. But you do have a couple of those already, and there are some, like, I know class by class is a pitfall, but there are some diminishing returns on that, and having to train him up from, like, Villager to... he could basically promote a base level, I believe, but like Villager to Mercenary to Myrmidon to Dread Fighter. That is long ways away. It's going to take a lot of effort before you're able to reap the benefits of that. And you also get Jesse, who, and this really hurts to say, who is a better version of Atlas if you go like that, and Jesse already isn't very good, so I don't think that's optimal either. I'm tempted to just say just go Archer anyway, and just, you know, accept the fact you're not going to have, you know, the godly level of strength and power and Hunter's Volley especially that Atlas has in Echoes, but you're still going to have, you know, a reasonably good endgame class that gets you somewhere. And, you know, Celica Route does only have Leon as an alternate archer, unless you, like, do death tricks, like kill off and revive someone like Python or something. But I don't think that is a very great idea. So Atlas feels like one of the worst characters in Celica Route. Not the terrible, he's like, there's probably a way to make him work, But for what I'm seeing, all the routes that you can take are just not very good. I think I'm actually tempted to put him below Est, and maybe even below Bowie. I don't really see the appeal, but maybe there is something Atlas can do that I'm missing. One thing I actually want to check real quick is if Atlas gets a good spell list as a Sage in Gaiden, because that's one thing I forgot to look up in advance, and that is something that might be an interesting niche for him. Well, he gets Arrow, whatever that is. Since Force translations are kind of slightly outdated. Yeah, he doesn't get like Sagittate, which doesn't exist in Gaiden, so that's not a thing either. That's kind of sad. I mean, he does recover, but so does every Sage. He gets Fire, then Arrow at level 16, and then Recover at the end. That's it. That's literally it. Like even Kamui, for example, gets like Excalibur at level 7 if you were to like Dreadfire loop him back to Villager and then all the way up to Sage again. So yeah, that's another thing that he can't do in Gaiden that he would do in Echoes. That's all I can think of for Atlas to make him better, but if you got any ideas, let me know. In the meantime, let's move on to Mystery of the Emblem. So in Mystery of the Emblem, we again have two characters. Great Dane has submitted Elrin, or Elrian, or Elrian, and then Empirical has submitted Ceta. And I'm kind of surprised that she hasn't been picked yet, but then again, Ceta is in like 5 different games, so there's almost always a Ceta left for us to tier. And she is fundamentally different in like every game, I feel like, so this will be interesting. He's only in book 2, of course. Elrian is not in book 1, so that's easy. I have not actually used him, but I've used Merrick quite a bit, and they are very similar. I think it's pretty natural to want to compare Elrin to Merrick because they join at such similar times and they have such similar utility. From what I know, mages and sages in FE3 are pretty good overall. I like that they share weapon level for both staff and tome rank, basically, so it lets them use just about anything once they've reached appropriate weapon level. Elrin, of course, can't use Excalibur. That is Merrick only, so that's like a bummer. That's like one of the reasons I think Merrick is better, for instance. There's no prologue utility or anything from Merrick because the prologue is an FE12 convention. So in that way, they have the same availability, basically. I guess Merrick joins like right away in his joining chapter, whereas Elrin joins at the end of it, or when you recruit him with Wendell. I actually missed Elrin on my first playthrough, come to think, of FE3. I didn't think he was recruitable for some reason. And I think he drops his star shard, so I just figured I had to kill him with Elrin. I think I just killed him with Merrick on turn 1, I think, with Excalibur. I was like, I don't see a way out of this. I was like, I'm not going to use a risky staff over this, come on. So I just kind of went with it. Because he like chases Merrick and everything. I just threats to crit him. It was very scary the first time I saw it. For what I can tell, you can just do just fine. He can use the Shaver, I do believe, which is going to be effective against the flying dragons and stuff that you're going to face in, I think, like 1 or 2 more chapters. So that could be potentially useful. Not as useful as Excalibur, but still pretty much right there. I think he's decent. You can probably keep up in indoor maps a little better than outdoor maps. So in that sense, I kind of want to put him like... I think if I put him in the C tier, that might even be overrating him a little bit. I do want to put him below Aaron. I think he has more utility overall. I know Bantu is here because he has like 1 or 2 chapters of like utility against ice dragons, and I guess the amount of work you have to put into Elrin probably warrants him here. This feels like a really big gap between A- and C, so maybe I'm underrating him actually. But he does have worse availability than just about everyone here, except like Zane, who is much better. So yeah, it is a big gap. Maybe Merrick should move down a little bit if I'm not valuing mage utility that much. I kind of like the healing utility. I just feel like, yeah, maybe Merrick should just move down a little bit. But I think he's really good. It just joins a little late. So I think I should close the gap a little bit. I'm just not sure exactly how much. Then we have Ceta. And Ceta is fairly good in FE3. It might be one of her worst games, but not exactly like super terrible. I actually have been using Ceta quite a bit in FE1, and I found her pretty bad there actually. Like, not terrible, but her base strength has been so low and there's no wing spear to make up for it. So she has to use like the Armor Slayer and the Rider's Bane. In FE3, I guess she's a little more tolerable. I believe she can still use the Silver Lance on base. So that's something you can do is just have Chagan give her the Silver Lance and have her like nearly one-shot enemies. I found her accuracy kind of lacking in FE1. But this is FE3, it's been a while since I used her there. Obviously we're going to rate her like kind of high because she is a flyer and she can promote into a Draconite, which solves most of her problems, I do believe. So that'll be fine, I suppose. I'm just mostly thinking in terms of book 1 here. Book 2, she also joins like really early still, after the other flyers, but that doesn't mean she's bad by any means. Anyway, I'll put Ceta in like the A- tier, I think. She might be better than this. I think she's better than Merrick in like all the games. The more I think about it, I think I gotta move Merrick down a little bit. I think this is a better tier for Ceta. Overall, she might also be even higher than this. It's kind of surprising I actually don't have any S plus tier units here. I feel like our S plus or S minus, I might have to put Pal there from through book 2, but then I don't know where I put her from FE through book 1. So maybe I will end up not having an S plus and S minus tier here. So maybe I gotta just cut the minus tiers for this one and make the gaps a little smaller. I think this model might do in some off-screen revisions. I'll take into account the comment section as well when I'm doing that, of course. So that is definitely in the planning. I might do like S, Jagan, Minerva, Marth, and I guess Yumina, and then like A tier Ceta, and then B tier Ds. That might work out better. I'm gonna try that when I'm like when I have time to experiment. Next up is FE4 Genealogy of the Holy War, and today we have 5 characters from that game, 2 dancers, sniper substitutes. The last 2 substitutes on the list actually have been purposely submitted. And then we have Aranis and Holland to round it all off. So let's see who submitted those before I forget to mention that. So Mylum submitted Aranis. We have Zetetic who submitted Holland. Jesus Kun is the one who keeps submitting substitutes. We've got Layla and Asalio here. And then finally we have Lean submitted by Scott Mitchell. And you know what? There was a duplicate submitted somewhere earlier, like last month by Scott. And he really wanted Fee in there, so I'm gonna throw Fee in there. There's a duplicate later on in this tier list as well, so you know what? I'll just throw Fee in for now, because Scott kind of requested her last month, and I said I would work something out. So here you go. Here's a free Fee for you, and this is convenient because now I can talk about both flyers at once in FE4. Big brain strategies. So I said it a couple times. I think already. I'm gonna move her up a little bit just so I can talk about both flyers. So the reason that the flyers in FE4 are not gonna be as highly ranked as other games' flyers is because, for one, the game doesn't have rescue utility, so you can't rescue drop people over. Roads make it that mounted units are actually better off than flyers for almost every map, the exception is the desert map. But since your main lord is a mounted unit anyway, there's no sense in getting ahead of him like there. It helps, obviously. You can kill some like mages and stuff ahead of schedule in chapter 5, or maybe some dark mages in chapter 7. But generally there's not a whole lot of use for flyers. They can make it to villages earlier and get some gold that way, but that's like very small, like that's a very small benefit, because if you get to a village like 2 turns later, you only lose out on 1,000 gold. And sometimes you don't even want to kill the bandits early, because you might want to get your thieves over to them and have them use like the steal skill on them to get 5,000 gold from the bandits before you kill them. So, and you're not beating mounted thieves to villages most of the time anyway. So yeah, this is not much of a reason to fly over stuff. There are some niche things that they can both do that I do enjoy doing, but I can't really give them a whole lot of credit for it. The nice thing about Falcon Knights in this game is that they can't use staves, only C rank unless you like pair Aranis with Claude. They can get B rank staves on Fee. But for the most part, there's not much of a benefit to it, I find. There are some like cool situations with this, like with the return staff or just healing someone who's injured, but I generally don't find it super useful. Because if you're flying, you're probably going to go somewhere else where no one else is, and then you don't really have anyone else to use the staff on, and they can't use the rescue staff or anything. That would be really cool if they could, but they can't. Other than that, they can use swords and lances, which is pretty helpful for weapon triangle control. Weapon triangle is like 20% in FE4, so that's a pretty big deal. Of course, being able to use swords is nice. Individually, Aaron also has pursuits, and then on promotion, Falcon Knights get adept, so it's a really good combat class. If you just ignore the weakness errors for a bit, which is pretty easy to do, then she ends up like doing pretty well in the arena and in combat in general. Being able to use both a Brave Lance and a Brave Sword at base with no promotion is super nice. So there's definitely a lot of benefits to this class, but the flying isn't a very big one, and they actually find themselves like unable to keep up with mounted units sometimes. So with that in mind, I think Aranis is like a B tier unit right now. That's what I'm feeling. She lacks availability as well, which is a bit of a thing. But I still think she might be more useful than some of these like chipping boys. I want to put her like over this whole squad over here, definitely. I think B- is fine for Aranis. In chapter 5, in the desert chapter, she can kill like the meteor mages, which I always find a really big pain. They do convert to yellow eventually and they stop attacking you, but by the time that happens, you are probably across the desert anyway. So I think it's better to have Aranis just kill a couple mages that are close to Sigurd, and that way keep them safe and at least stop the meteor animation from playing. Fee, her desert chapter is less useful for flyers, I think, but she can fly down to help out Leaf and Finn and friends. I usually don't do this because I'm able to just get Leaf out of there with a return ring and return band, and or return staff. and solve it that way, or keep them alive while they're in the area and have feed or something else. She can secure a pretty good village. I think it's a shield ring village that she can help secure. That is really helpful. Outside of that, I'm having trouble finding plays where Fee is helpful. I know that like every Fire Emblem 4 player I see play Chapter 9, for example, on streams, I see them fly Fee all the way over to the left in Chapter 9 to save that group of like 6 villages that's being burned down, you know, the place where Musar appears. And like without fail, almost always, they end up seizing the castle that the bandits belong to, and then just Feast is there like, okay, I actually have nothing to do when I'm in that group of villages. That's what happens to me too, because I sometimes forget that that group of bandits that burns out those villages is assigned to that castle that you see so quickly in order to recruit Hannibal. So that I always find that kind of funny. But yeah, there are some villages that you can help secure, but it's not a super big deal, I think. Fee does have like better combat than Aranis, just because like she's basically Aranis plus with like the benefits of a father. So something like Nowish to give her critical and a cost, or Claude to make her better with magic swords. That works really well on them, by the way, because they have a really huge promotion bonus for Falcon Knight for magic. So they can sometimes 2-hit kill with like a wind sword or the light brand, which can be kind of cool. So Fee has all sorts of ways to make her combat even better than Aranis. I kind of want to say that utility for flyers is even less in Gen 2 than in Gen 1, but I have some places where flyers can save turns in like LTC runs and stuff. So I kind of want to put them like together, and I think overall Fee's combat is slightly better, but less useful overall, I think. So I want to put them like next to each other, but like right here. I think that'd be good. Then we have Synthetic Submission of Holin, and Holin is a foot unit, so by default he's probably not going to make it past the middle of the list. He is like pretty bulky, which I like, but not bulky enough to take like every single enemy in an army. Oftentimes it depends on what he faces. I think he can survive like almost every hit from like the Free Knights from Beowulf squad, or maybe that group of like Cavaliers and Paladins that comes down from Augustine Castle. I think it's called Augustine, the latest localization. It depends, but if you have him face like 16 enemies, he's probably going to die, and yeah, so you still got to be a little bit careful with him sometimes. And the point is, 84 enemies move in like use blocks sometimes, and it can be hard to face all of them, even if you're holding, even if you're bulky like him. Sigurd can face him no problem. But yeah, I think he should end up like roughly where Ira is, and I don't remember where I put. She's in D tier somewhere, so that's probably where it's going to end up. I'm going to ruin my beautiful one line each tier list. I always hate doing that, but it has to be done, I think. Just going to delay it as long as possible. He has Luna, which I don't think is a very great skill in FE4 because it's unreliable, and you know, if you're not one-round killing and you one-round kill next to Luna, it's like, okay, what did I really... Like, I couldn't really count on that. It's like a movement star or an proc or something. And it's only skill percent, so it's like 20% most of the time, I think, when you're playing with Holin. So he does have Pursuit, I guess, and he can 2-hit kill some enemy types with like a Steel Blade, so he's not always relying on Luna. It looks cool in the arena, I guess, and that's pretty much about it. Kind of lacking in availability too, so in that way it might be worse than Ira, but if one of them is going to see field combat, it's probably going to be Holden just because he has more bulk, so he can survive more enemies. So yeah, we'll put him next to Ira, put her over Ira. I think he's slightly better overall due to better combat, but there's not a big difference between them. Okay, I swapped around the orders a little bit so I can talk about both dancers at once. We'll start with Aselo, who is basically Faval in a lot of ways, but without the U-Fel. I've talked about archers in FE4 at length here with both Jamka and Faval, so I could probably be brief here and just say, alright, no mounts, no enemy phase, it's a bad time. They won't hit kill flyers, which is super cool, and Aselo actually has like one of the secret events that all substitutes have that I should check real quick. That's like the one thing that distinguishes substitutes and makes them interesting. Other than that, they tend to be worse versions of their kids. And like a lot of people, there's always like a guy requesting like, hey, Mekkah, do a sub playthrough at FE4. And whenever I did like one of those long ago, and I just end up having more fun using people like Shannon and Aris and Julia than people who are not substitutes, or people who are substitutes, because it's not as interesting. The exception is like Linda. She's like very cool and very interesting with Paragon and Wrath. But Aselo is just like, okay, I'm an archer, I have a pursuit and I think a cost, and have fun. It's not super interesting to use a unit that's bad, I think. Like, you can feed him kills. Yeah, he does have a cost. Okay, he does have that. That's kind of cool, I guess. Now let me check that secret event of his real quick, just so I can. I think if he visits the villages nearby his home, he gets like a super cool convo that a lot of people like. I do think that the subs get like slightly more development as characters than you know, their kids' counterparts, which is kind of nice. Yeah, so if Aselo visits the village near the castle that he comes out of, Connaught Castle, Connaught, he will get a convo with a kid that he's raised there, one of the orphanage kids, I guess, that Patty talks about. He will get +3 strength, which is pretty good. It's a nice bonus. It works for Dimna as well, but I think even with that bonus, it doesn't really change the way he works as a unit very much. Because he's just... the class he is in is just so bad for FE4, and even though there's a lot of Wyverns coming up right after he joins, a lot of people don't have trouble one-round killing Wyverns, and even if they did, even if like one unit with like decent bulk, just enemy faces a bunch of Wyverns, is still better off. I do believe there is some AI thing, I don't know whether it's on normal mode or clever mode, where if you put a guy with a bow in range of a bunch of people with javelins, they might be tempted to just suicide on him even if they can attack at one range. That's something I've never been able to verify it myself, but I have seen it happen, I think, or I've seen people, like somewhat credible people, talk about it. So it might be possible for him to have a good enemy phase and work out some dragons that way, like some Javelin Wyvern riders, and that might give him enemy phase, but generally I don't think he has a whole lot to do. There's like one army in the whole game that only has 2 range equipped. That's Scorpio's army, the final chapter. I think Faval has a good shot at surviving that because of the UFEL, and it adds a bit of survivability, right? It gives him renewal and a speed bonus to compensate the weight. I don't think... also just has better stats because he's a kid. He's gonna have like a really huge HP growth. Aselo, I don't think has the stats to survive that encounter. Aselo does have the potential to one-round Julius, if you want to be really, really funny. I think with an infinite like proc charge or something, he has the potential to one-round Julius. But yeah, other than that, I think it's just the worst Faval for the most part. And that leaves us with the FE4 Dancers. There's actually like one more left. We still have Sylvia at the tier, but these are the Gen 2 Dancers, Layla and Lean. Dancers obviously have to go very high because refreshing for people is overpowered. There's 2 philosophies you can take when using Dancers, I think. One of them is you give them the leg ring, and then you have 9 move on your Dancer, and the night ring would be good as well, because they're like the only good target for the night ring, besides like Chapter 6 Selef. So night ring, leg ring, Dancer is very good if you want to have like multiple people keep up with your Lord and destroy a lot of armies at once. Like being able to attack and then cancel into place 4 diamonds, put the Dancer in the middle, and then do it again. You kill like 8 people, and that's 4 additional people for your Dancer alone. Or you can just have someone like heal again or restore someone, like if you're facing a lot of status stabs. There's a lot of uses for a Dancer. Obviously you can chain it with like the rescue staff to get absurd amounts of movement in. Like Selef can just cross an entire area of the map with just 1 turn, thanks to dancing and rescuing. It's super, super overpowered and super fun to use, even if you're not into LTC. Excuse me, even if you're not into LTCing. So I would recommend that to anyone, even if you don't want to like, you know, speedrun a game or whatever, or LTC a game. So I generally have said I like Lean better than Layla because of inheritance. I like being able to pass on the Night Ring and save Layla the gold for that, because Layla cannot inherit any gold, seeing as she's just a substitute, or she can't inherit any items either. Whereas Lean, you can give her anything she needs. Lean also is better in the arena generally because she has Miracle, whereas Layla doesn't have any skills besides Charm. A lot of people cite Charm as like a reason to actually actively kill off Sylvia in Gen 1, just so you can have Charm on your Dancer, but I don't think Charm on your Dancer is that good, because in order for it to be useful, they have to be within 3 squares of your offensive units, and I usually just have my Dancer like way further back than that, and if I need them like closer to me, I use the Rescue Staff during the turn. But I don't think Charm is relevant enough. Like +10 hit and avoid is good, but it's not worth like getting your Dancer like at risk over. So and like if Charm is very important, you can boost like Dermot and Nana closer to you, and they'll be able to provide all the charm you need, I think. And then you have like, of course, things like lover bonuses as well, if you want more than that. I think 3 charms is overkill most of the time. I don't think you need it. I don't even need charm that's often on Selef anyway, because he's just that strong. And the same goes for a lot of powerful characters. Your weaker characters, they can make use of charms. Like if you want to do something crazy, like kill Bloom with a very underleveled character, or like get certain boss skills to super weak characters, then a 3rd charm might be useful just to increase the odds of it happening a little bit. I can see that, but that's not the kind of playthrough we're looking at here. So I don't think charm is very good, and I'd rather have the inheritance that Lean provides. She can also like use the, like having more money inheritance is nice for you, like letting her use the Sleep Sword. Maybe proc Adept with it, because she also has that as a skill. Sylvia, for some reason, like a bunch of skills that she can pass down. But Charm can be nice, like sometimes, I guess. It's not a terrible substitute, but I would recommend Lean to most players. Anyway, I'm thinking like S- or A+ for them. I don't think they're as dominant as Sigurd. I kind of want to put them like around here somewhere, I think. we'll go with that for now. And that rounds off genealogy. We have like 7-ish characters left. Yeah, 8 characters is what we have left. Well, 7 because Arion doesn't really count. So that's all we got. Next up, we have some Fire Emblem Thracia 776, and in this one we're literally almost done with the tier list. There's 5 characters left and we're doing 4 of them today. So we have Halvan, Trude, Shiva, and Dermot, and they were submitted by... why did I not grab this in the first place? Mo submitted Halvan and Trude, Command List submitted Shiva, and then Dermot was submitted by Command List as well. And Modern Mind also wanted Trude, and for once in his life, Trude was actually requested more than one time. By more than one different person. So that's a duplicate. That's why I gave you guys Fee instead, and hopefully that will appease the gods. Always check for duplicate submissions, guys. You just check the whole thread on Patreon to see. Using Control F might help you a little bit there. Anyway, Halvan is a character I think I've said in the past that I don't really like the most common perception of, or at least what used to be the most common perception. I think it's changed a bit since then, since people more often than I would like to think sometimes copy my opinions 1v1 or you know, 1-to-1. Halvan is usually like compared to Orson, and because Orson is so good, people just kind of assume that Halvan is good too. And there are things that are good about Halvan. Mostly its availability, and then the pursuit critical coefficient of 4, or follow-up coefficient I guess is what it's called now. So he has a like every second hit that Halvan does, he has a 4, like, his crit gets quadrupled, which is insane. Sadly though, he doesn't have that many crit setups. Like Orson has the Pooji, which gives him like 100% guaranteed crit whenever he double attacks, because the Pooji itself has some crit. But, and he has Wrath of course. But Halvan doesn't really have one of those axes. He has like a killer axe which you can get from like the 14X. That's the first killer axe you get, I do believe. And other than that, he has like the battle axe, I guess, but that's not a very good axe. It's very inaccurate and a bit rare too. I guess you can get some by capturing. You get one from Dalsin's inventory, of course, but they're kind of hard to capture because the enemies that carry them are usually armor knights that are just kind of hard to get sometimes. I haven't tried it very much, so might be surprised there if someone pulls it off, but generally I don't think you have a very good crit setup with Halvan, at least not as good as something like Fergus with the Rapier or Orson with the Pooji or anything like that. So I think sometimes when Halvan is short of 2-hit KOing an enemy, he's going to be short of like just killing them altogether, just because he lacks the crit. He also doesn't have any supports after Avel is gone, where he's allowed to like get like 40% extra from the support bonus of like 10 crit. So that is unfortunate. He gets the Brave Axe from a village, but I don't think it really belongs to him. I think most people right now treat the Brave Axe more as Dagger's personal weapon, or they give it to Dalsin in Manster, stuff like that. But I don't think Halvan has any real claim to it. He does one-round with it, of course, so if he's the only character that needs it to one-round stuff, then there's no reason not to give it to him. But I think at least most people want it on Dagdar for easier capturing and like taking into account misses. Because if Dagdar attacks like someone on terrain, for example, it can be hard to hit them reliably like all the times he attacks. You might not even get a cost. So Halvan might want the Brave Axe then, but there's only one person who can have it at a time. You can trade it around sometimes, but they're not always going to be near each other. So that's my point. If you're reliant on like a single use resource, you only have a single copy of, then sometimes you'll be left out. And if you do get it, then someone else doesn't get it. So it's not really a net gain versus utility, if that makes sense. He doesn't really have anything else special about him, I do believe. He's just a generic fighter that can sometimes kill stuff. I think he one-rounds enemies in Chapter 1, and a bit of couple more early on. If he gets lucky with strength level ups, he might be able to kill more enemies. And then he just kind of vanishes for like the Manster arc, and he comes back and he can like fight some stuff, but unless he uses like a stronger axe, I don't think he even has the strength to KO enemies. And if he does use like a steel axe, he might not double, or he might not hit, because axe accuracy is kind of awful in this game beyond the iron axe. And I just don't really find a reason to deploy Halvan very often. FE5 has a lot of characters that you can just deploy at base, no matter what chapter they join, and they'll do fine. Like a lot of pre-promotes and a lot of characters like staff utility characters. And Halvan is just more of a traditional Fire Emblem character that you have to raise from the ground up, and if you don't train him, he doesn't like keep up with the rest of your army. So, for example, there's never any reason to deploy Halvan untrained over like Ralph late in the game, or even Fred or Glade or stuff like that. So I think Halvan's utility is very limited in that regard. I'll give him some credit for his early game utility, but I'm never really a big fan of like him overall as a character you want to use all the game long. He's not particularly good against like Dark Mages, for instance, which is kind of like a requirement if you want to be deployed late game. So it might be weird, but I want to put him like very low. I got Orson an A+, but again, I don't think associating with Orson is the right idea. I'm gonna put him like at the top of D tier, I think, as like the most utility there. I could see him in like C tier. He's not bad. I could see him as like, the thing is, someone like what's his name, Brighton or Machua, they are available in chapters where you don't have many other options, and you don't really have a choice. But for Halvan, you know, he's in an army with Finn, Dagdar, Avel, and those can really carry combat all by themselves. So he's much less of a standout character than someone like Brighton and Machua, because there's just no alternatives to using them basically for the longest time. Then we have the double submitted Trude, and Trude's biggest claim to fame is probably his Nihil skill that he has at base, and there's like no other character that has it at base other than Marita. And funnily enough, Marita joins like right before, and she doesn't have Nihil herself, but she does have it on the Marita sword. So in that way, I think Marita kind of steals Trude's thunder. I used to think, well, you know, Trude, he doesn't really have that many things going for him, but at least he has Nihil. So if you ever have an enemy that's like tough to kill because of all their skills, things like, you know, Elf with Miracle and Wrath, at least you have Trude as an option to take him out. But Marita is just so much better. Like, Marita just saved my butt in my Iron Man playthrough by being able to kill Elf in the final chapter. That was such a big help, and I don't know how Trude can ever compete with that. On his own merits, Trude has like some decent combat, but I think the similar problem to Halvan, where you just don't need that much decent combat. He has B rank swords at base and a silver sword and like a decent base strength and some good HP as well. I think it's like 30 HP at base, which is rather high considering his classes in Myrmidon. And he's like basically ready for promotion. He's like 2 more levels and he's there. So he can be okay, but I don't see much of a point to him. I don't remember if he has enough attack to 2-hit kill most enemy types. He does have like access to silver swords, like I said, as well as fire sword and wind sword and all that stuff. So there's probably like setups for him. But if he has to rely on crits, he's not going to get there, because his pursuit critical is like 1 or 2, I believe. So that's not really an option for him. I'm going to double check just to make sure I don't talk on my butt here. But I think in general, if he doesn't have enough attack to kill enemies, he's kind of like up the creek without a paddle. And if that's your only thing you can do is combat that isn't even that great, I don't even know how you're going to get by. Yeah, he's 1% critical. 1, that's it. And then he has 11 base skill, so 11 crit, 41% crit with the killing edge, I guess. That's okay. It's not great. And nothing else really stands out. I think I've seen some good arguments as to why he's on par with Marita at least. But I think Marita, at least, once she's trained, she has the ability to like overkill, one-round kill some dangerous bosses like Elf. There's not a whole lot of other bosses like that. And if it's like an armor boss, she might be even in like danger of dying to like a Master Lance. I don't know if Trude has the capability to survive that, but I think I'll put him like right below Marita. I don't think he has a whole lot of things to do other than that. I'll put him like around here somewhere. I think the free utility that Gonzalez provides is a little better actually than what he has to offer. But you know, he can like, if you just like deploy him right away after you recruit him, like in chapter 13, I think you'll find he can like 2-hit kill something like a bow knight there, for example, or like a, I don't know, a soldier or a mage or something. I don't think that's a big problem, but you know, by that point you have like so many characters that can do that like generic enemy one rounding, and after like the route split, you get into a point where that kind of combat is kind of whatever utility. Like so many other characters can do it, and there's less of a need for it. That I don't think he like belongs like more higher than this. And I think I could argue him even lower. But I think if I don't put him any higher than this, then Valkama's gonna, you know, be very angry. So we'll put him like around here for now. Maybe both he and Marita should move down a bit. That's also an option, because I could see them being worse than the pre-promotes like Xavier and Ilios. Again, keep in mind Xavier is not being put here because of his recruitment requirements is not being factored in here. So Xavier is just being factored as a character you have from chapter 19 onwards. Then we have Shiva, another Myrmidon actually, but one that joins very, very early compared to them, like chapter, I want to say 7, I think is the number of the escape chapter that he's in. Basically the last Manster chapter, so I can't really count it as Manster utility, because I think by the time you recruit him it's basically over. And recruiting him is kind of tricky, but I usually manage to set myself up for doing it reliably. Even though talking with him as Safi is kind of tricky. He does have that movement star that makes it tricky sometimes. He has Soul. I've never been a really big fan of Soul, but in this game it's kind of okay, I guess. It can save your butt. It's good in the arena if you do like the arena abuse. And, you know, if he's facing like a long enemy phase and there's like a chance he might die, then Soul tends to turn that chance into nothingness, because it's kind of like extra avoid in a way. You get hit and then you have like chances to heal until you get hit again. So if that happens, you basically get extra avoid. That's pretty good. He has the sword rank to use like fire swords, I do believe, at base. At least I'm pretty sure he gets there by the time it matters, basically. But I think he might actually have base sword rank of B. Yeah, that's what he does have. Okay, so that's pretty good. And he doubles, and he doesn't have too much strength, but he has like a ton of PCC and a sappy support. So if he wants to crit, he probably can do it. He joins with the Killing Edge you can use, and Killing Edges, they're not like everywhere in Thracia, but you can get a couple. There's one you can capture from one of his friends, I believe, and there's like one you can capture off of him in 2x. I don't like the capturing that one, but for a lot of people who do it, that is another option. And there's like a couple more somewhere spread out throughout the game. So generally, I think if you need a crit weapon on Shiva, you can use it. And there's also like Fire Sword, Thunder Sword, Wind Sword, perhaps late in the game for one to range options. Being sword locked in Thracia is not that big of a deal. That said, like I said, it's combat not a super big deal in Thracia overall, I think. So he's more of a... I use him as a filler in like chapter 8, and after that I tend not to use him again. But I used him like on my first playthrough, I used him like all the way through. And I was pretty happy with him overall as a combat unit. I just think like you could argue Machua's contributions are better because she is in a harder part of the game. I think he's better than Olwen for sure. And I think actually you could put him like arguably he should be better than Marina, because by the time Marina joins he's going to be better, right? And his utility up to the point is not bad at least. So I could put him like around here. I think that's fine. But I could see it like the other way around. It depends on like how much you value the free utility versus kind of having to train him up. He's good at base though. You don't really have to train him. You just need to like keep using him throughout the game, but he's kind of self-sufficient for the most part. I like that about him. If you need him to like kill an armor knight, you can use an armor slayer. If you need him to attack someone at range, you can use the fire sword, that kind of stuff. So just give him good weapons and he'll do well. It's just there's not that many chapters left after like the mid game where you need this level of combat. So I tend to prefer like units with more utility, but for a straight combat unit, he's pretty good. And there's Dermot, the last Final 5 character that we're tiering today. And Dermot, I like him more in FE4 because he's around more often. He joins very late in this one. I was kind of disappointed when I learned that. But at least he still has like a lot of the things that make Fergus good. He has 5% critical. He also has Charm, and he can use the Bio Sword, which he joins with. That's kind of a funny sword. I believe it gives both Vantage and Wrath, which is kind of unnecessary. It's like they kind of cancel each other out, because the way Wrath works is it will make you crit on a counter attack. So after the enemy attacks you, and Advantage makes you attack first, so it negates the Wrath. So it's kind of like what we're doing. But it's also just a sword with a lot of crit on it, and some pretty good stats overall. I think the hit could be better. I'm gonna check them, like double check them real quick, because I do want to be sure that I'm right. Bio Sword is like 70 hit, give Vantage and Wrath, yeah, and then like 60 might is pretty impressive. I like that a lot. Dermot has like Charm, which is kind of cool, and I remember he's like fairly good in 0% growth. I don't think you have much of a reason to use him outside of that. I think if you don't like Iron Man FE5, you're probably going to have a bunch of characters that are stronger than Dermot overall, and the point where he joins is definitely the point where you just want to use a bunch of staff users to get through everything. But, you know, there might be some combat he needs to do, and he can use the Blaggy Sword, which is very effective against, what's his face, Raedric. So if you haven't trained Leaf or Fergus for whatever reason, or even Nana, then, you know, he can be a solution to your problems, and take him out. He's not great. You can also use Galzus, though, in most of those cases. But in the final chapter, for example, he's a pretty good candidate for taking on the Raedric clone. So I wouldn't mind using Dermot for that purpose if I had to. Keep pointing a gun at me. One bad thing, I guess, about like him having Vantage then is if he attacks an enemy with Wrath, he's gonna get counter crit, and Wrath goes through scrolls. This can also be an issue against the enemy Thief Fighter in the final chapter, I think. So gotta be careful with that. I've seen it happen. Like I think that Thief Fighter also has Vantage Wrath, so you can actually like have your skills backfire on you sometimes with that kind of combo. So be wary of that. But yeah, not like I don't think he's like a late game pre-promote, but I don't think he's as good as say Ilios or Zephyr. I think those have like stronger final chapter performances overall, and also longer utility than him. I think he joins on like chapter 20 or something, chapter 21. So there's not a lot of time left, and a lot of those chapters are usually warp skips. So in that regard, I think he should be, I think, better than Conomore, but not much better than that. So I think around here seems fine. He doesn't have that much good free utility, but I don't think he's bad. And that leaves only one character left in Thracia. That's the only character that we've got left. Yeah, I'm surprised too. I know, right? That's the last one. I can't believe it. We're gonna actually have finished the game soon enough. There's actually a game that we're finishing next episode, I think. After this, that's gonna finish sooner than Thracia. But other than that, yeah, damn. Alright, so we have a very interesting batch of Fire Emblem 6 characters here. Zachary submitted Ray, Autistic Biden submitted Saul, T-Class 45 submitted OJ, or yeah, OJ, I think that's how you're supposed to say it. Gonzalez was submitted by Jonathan, Chlorine by Gaius, Boris submitted by Lucas, then Reed has submitted Murnus, and then finally we have Thea, also sometimes known as Tate, submitted by Corey. So thank you all very much. That is going to be the last game for today, but you know, they say last but not least because we actually have like 8 characters and we're not even like through all the FE6 yet. There's still like a sizable batch left. So Ray, we'll go on him first. He joins like level 12, so an insta promotion range, but I feel like most people just try to use him for a couple levels before they promote him at least. That's what I did in my first FE6 playthrough. Personally, I used to think that Ray was really good back when I really started out and only read like GameFAQs guides, because people have a tendency to overhype like dark magic users in the GBA games just because, I don't know, I think it's just the fact that they're rare, so they want one of every class, and then the fact that they use like unique spells kind of appeals to them. There are some cool things about dark magic in FE6, but I think they apply to Nime more than they apply to Ray. For example, the Apocalypse Tome is something you get very late in the game. It's better suited on Nime, I think, than on Ray. The other cool thing about FE6 Dark Tomes is Nosferatu. It only weighs you down by 2 as an unpromoted shaman, I do believe, and then Flux weighs him down by 1. This is different from like Kanas in FE7, who gets weighed down by Flux by 1, and Nosferatu weighs like 14, so I think he's weighed down by like 5, 6, 7 points or something. It's quite a lot. So that's a big difference. Unfortunately, Ray joins at a time like at the end of the Western Isles arc, and that's right before you get access to killer weapons from the armory. You get like killer lances, killer axes, killer killing edges, killer bows. I just named them all because why not? And that is the point where player accuracy goes up quite a bit. Reliability, I should say, because crit also adds reliability. That sounds weird, but the point is, if you double attack and you have like a shot at critting, then it's basically like you can miss more often. You can afford to miss more often because sometimes you'll compensate with a crit. Why is this a big deal for Ray, in my opinion? Well, Ray can't use killer weapons. He can only use Flux and, well, Nosferatu, I guess. And those, they don't have great accuracy. Ray's gonna have accuracy issues. Now, up to that point, most characters have some accuracy issues. Unless they're attacking like a fighter while using a sword, they're probably gonna have some hit problems. But around chapter 13 is kind of when that's sort of over, in my opinion. You also have like more reliable characters now, like Milady and Percival, who can really carry a lot of weight with a high amount of reliability. And Ray is like, it's like starting from scratch with a recruitable character that's not very fun. Ray doesn't have very good hit rates. He does hit on res, which is nice. Gives him quite a bit of damage, but he still needs kill set up for him. He's not very self-sufficient at all. I've heard Project Ember changes this quite a bit. I believe he's got like really good magic at base there. But in FE6, I think he like 2 shots, most unpromoted enemy types at least. But he's not self-sufficient by any means. Once range is good. The ability to promote whenever is nice. I think optimally he probably does promote right away if you have the Guiding Ring for him. That is like something that could be called into question because there are a lot of like potential Guiding Ring candidates in FE6, but only 2 that you get reasonably early. I think 1 from chapter 8 and then 1 in chapter 14. And you have like Saul, Chlorine, who I'm going to talk about later, Lou, Lena if you're using her for fun, because some people do like that. And the list just goes on and on. So there might not be a Guiding Ring available for Ray right away. Ray right away. So yeah, I don't think Ray is great. I do like Apocalypse a lot. I said it works better on Nime because she has A rank staves in addition to a high dark magic rank, so she can make use of the extra warp range that the Apocalypse magic boost provides. Whereas Ray, he promotes, he gets E rank staves. You could probably get that up to D or E if you try really hard, but staff rank grinding is a lot of work in FE6. 50 weapon XP from E to D alone is a lot, so for him to get even like, not even like warp, but something like barrier, just getting there is like 100 times healing, and even in the casual playthrough, I think that's a bit much. So I think he's going to be focused on attacking, and I don't think he's a great attacker at all. I think he's one of the worst magic users. I would put him above you, though, because he does join earlier, and assuming you can get him a Guiding Ring, he has more utility than you overall does. I don't think I factored in use recruitment cost. I'm going to assume it's not really a thing, nor the fact that you want to get his 10,000 gold option if you do recruit him. But I think it's fair to like put them next to each other because they're pretty similar from the time that they join onwards. I don't think they have like any huge differences between them. It feels a bit weird to have Roy below them both. Roy does have like a lot more availability, obviously, but he is pretty bad for a lot of it. But I could see it going like this way. for example. That might be more fair to the both of them. So I think like a C tier, and you could argue him lower. Like obviously Ray's not an optimal unit, but I don't think he's so bad when you put him low. I think FE6 does have a lot of these characters where they don't really feel that great to use or anything. They feel like more of a struggle than like actual help for a lot of the playthrough. But because there's so many of them, I think it still puts them like roughly in the middle, basically. Next up, we have Sol, and Sol is probably the best staff user in the entire game until, like, at least until Nime and Yoder join, and then he has some stiff competition. But until then, he has the highest staff rank in the game. He has C rank staffs at base, which is very impressive. If you factor in his promotion bonus, that's basically B rank staffs at base, so he only has to grind for 1 rank to get Warp. That's a very big deal for fast playthroughs, but really any playthroughs, because there's some maps in the mid game before Yoder and Nime join that Warp is a huge like hassle saver. I don't even want to say time saver because that makes it sound like it's only good for low turn count playthroughs. It's not even good for speedruns, by the way. Grinding Sol is not worth it. I think Kirby looked into it, it's not worth it. But for LTCs, you definitely want to have some kind of Warp. And I think I've talked a lot about like how Ellen is short of reaching that because she joins with D rank. A little bit earlier, but not much. But Sol can feasibly reach A rank in time for LTC to warp skip chapter 14x and chapter 16x, two very tedious chapters. It's also handy in a lot of chapters in between. Probably not useful in 15, but in 16 it can also be handy to get to treasure in time and stuff. There's a really good one, I think it's like a 2-3 turn clear by Orisa for FE6, like a rigged LTC, where he really shows off the warp potential of Sol. It is rigged though, but I think even in vanilla, like, I don't know, if you use like an average stats patch, I think he'd still be a very important piece of the puzzle. You can also use Barrier very early on because you get one in chapter 7, I think, in one of the chests, so you can use it throughout chapter 8, which is a very long chapter. And in the Western Isles, there's a Fog of War map where you can use Torch, so he doesn't even always need someone nearby that's like injured, which is a problem that someone like Priscilla or Sarah sometimes have when grinding up staff rank, or even Ellen. So lots of options like that to grind him up. He still only gets, I think, 1 or 2 points of staff XP every time he uses staff, doesn't matter how high level it is. That's one of the things that makes weapon rank grinding so hard in FE6. But regardless of those limitations, he ends up doing pretty well for himself. And FE6 is also just a game where staffs in general just have a lot of utility. You get a rescue staff fairly early, you get a hammer, barrier utility is good, and of course all those annoying status staffs that FE6 has to offer, like the sleep and berserk ranges from like high enemies, high level druids and stuff. You face those quite a lot, and people also need healing because enemies just hit really hard when they do hit you. So just a lot of reasons why having a good staff user is around, or why having one around is going to be very good. I would say he's like an A+ unit. I think I would honestly put him up here somewhere. I want to say he's better than Nime. I would say honestly I could put him up here too, but that might be a bit too much praise. He doesn't have too much self-sufficiency, if that makes any sense, so it feels weird to have him over here. He also has less ability than all 3 of these units. I think overall he does more work throughout the playthrough than Nime, although a lot of it is like self-improvement, so you could argue it the other way around. I think when they're both around, Nime is definitely better, but that's only for chapter like roughly 18 or 19 onwards. I think it depends on the route you go. But Nime is definitely better when she is around. And it just depends like how much you think Sol helps you up to that point. I think a lot of it, what it does is just self-improvement, like him spamming Torch or using Barrier for no real reason isn't really going to help you very much, but he does heal your character, so I could see it the other way around too. And I could see him over all like these guys too. I think Donna, for example, would put him over Alan Lance, but hey, we'll do like this for now to appease the casuals. I actually don't know why I'm putting I just have a feeling it should be like this, but I don't really have a rational reason to back it up. We're just going to go with it like this. Very, very good character. His base magic is like surprisingly low, but in FE6 you don't need that much magic to be effective at healing or anything like that. Next up we have OJ, and I think I'm supposed to say something here. Let me see, I had something here written down. I don't see it right now. I think they said he should be like a really highly rated unit. I don't know about that one. He does join like reasonably early at least, so he's not beyond salvation, but the fact that he needs salvation alone is a strike against him. He's not very self-sufficient when he joins. He does join like right before a bunch of axe users show up, not in his joining chapter, but like right after that in the 8 and 9. You have access to a lot of like axe using enemies that he can grind on. I don't remember if he doubles them at base. I think he definitely doubles steel axes. I just don't remember him doubling anything else. A lot of people compare him to Deke. The fact that he's worse than Deke, like, I think that's easily the case. Deke has better bases and he joins earlier. Like, what is OJ supposed to put up against that? Like, slightly better growth? I don't think they really work. But but like I think he's inferior to almost every character you have. It's the same thing with like Nino, where people go like, all right, you don't have to train Nino, you have Eric and Pent. And my response is usually yes, but also you have literally anyone else who's also better. Of course, OJ is not as underleveled or underpowered compared to Nino. He's like a level 1 character in Chapter 8. That's not the same thing as a level 5 character in Chapter 28, but I think it has the same principle to it, right? And he does need some help to get up there. When he gets up there, I think he does just fine. He's easier to carry around than Deke, so that's one advantage that he has. Like one argument he has towards like a somewhat reasonably early promotion where he's actually useful. And Heroes is not a terrible class in FE6. I believe he gets some good bulk on promotion and the option to use axes, which is good because a lot of FE6 enemies use lances. It will take him a while to get the killer axes though, because I think he gets E rank axes, and that allows you to use steel axes and hand axes, but not killer axes, and that's a big deal. So he's going to be stuck with using like killing edges if he wants to have a killer weapon. Still pretty good, but having killer axes would have been better, I think. He can get up there, but again, you only get one weapon XP per hit in FE6, regardless of whether you're using like an iron axe or a steel axe or a devil axe. So that's not helping him. But just the fact that you use iron axes and hand axes is nice. I don't think 1-2 range is a very big deal in FE6. Javelins and hand axes generally just don't have the hit to have an impactful enemy phase. And they also just tend to not have the might. So what ends up happening a lot of the time, I feel like, when you use a javelin in FE6, is okay, you counter an archer for like, I don't know, like most of their HP, like 80% of their HP. And then enemy healer just heals them back up and is like, okay, I just didn't do anything. Not every chapter is like that, of course, but I feel like a lot of them are. So that's why I don't think hand axes are that big of a deal, but it's there and it helps, I guess. So I think I could see an argument for him being like the best D tier here. I would honestly say Ellen is better than him though, so maybe it should be more like this. I actually think I'm being a little harsh on Ellen. I think her early game healing utility until we get Chlorine is better than what we have for the most part here, but I could see it almost anyway, really. OJ, by the time Geese joins, I think it'll be better. So if we penalize him for like how much we have to train him up, he might be a bit worse. Geese is obviously better if you insta promote him, but that kind of gimps him in the long term. And I don't. Both of these are just not very good long term anyway, but they're all right. So I could see it could go either way. I think depends on your philosophy, on your play style. I almost want to say. Next is Gonzalez, one of my favorite units to use in FE6, but not one I'm going to put very high because of it, because he has some real issues. So Gonzalez has a lot of weird things about him. I guess we just start with the basics here. You recruit Gonzalez in the Western Isles, and he promotes to a Berserker. He's the only playable Brigands in FE6, and I think one of the first in the series. I think Marty was the first one. I guess you can count Daros as a pirate. But yeah, he's a bandit, promotes to Berserker with a hero crest, and Berserker in this game is pretty nuts actually. It's a class with plus 30 crit, just like Swordmaster, and Gonzalez gets a massive plus 5 skill and like some speed as well and some bulk, all pretty good stuff. He's a really lopsided character though. He has a lot of HP and a lot of strength and enough speed to double, which is rare in FE6. Not a lot of characters have both his strength and his speed. Like his strength is massive and his speed is like, I think it's like on par with faster characters. Not like Rutger, but like Shin and Sue, I guess, is like a good comparison for him. I do remember him doubling somewhat easily in FE6 the last time I used him. It's been a while. When he promotes kind of depends on how you want to use him and what route you take, because in one route Gonzalez joins at level 5, and a lot of people like that one over the one where he joins at level 12, because it gives him a couple extra levels to like level up, and the XP gain is pretty fast. And then you can promote him whenever you want after level 10. I think a lot of people like it because they can train him all the way to 20 and have more level ups to work with. And like for clarification, he joins with different levels, but the same base stats. So basically, if you level up to level 5 Gonzalez to level 12, he's going to be better than the one you got at level 12 at that point. I think there's an argument to be made that the level 12 one is better, because you can insta promote him, and because Gonzalez at base has such a big skill issue. Like his base skill is really low, and then axes have terrible hit rates, especially with weapon child disadvantage or terrain in the way. There's just no way you're hitting anything reliably with an iron axe even, or a killer axe. And the other reason you want to go the A route where he joins at level 5 is there are buyable killer axes in the armory there, whereas there's no such thing in chapter, whatever equivalent chapter is in the B route. But you do get killer axes fairly soon after, so it's not a huge issue for you. You can go to B route. I also just like going A route because it's easier, but that's like neither here nor there. So 2 ways of using Gonzalez, 2 different, like, I think it's almost like an unintended difference between them. I don't think he's supposed to be joining at different levels, especially considering it's the same bases. But pretty interesting to see how people treat it that way. I I just go A route generally, so I'm just going to judge him as a level 5 self. You know, I don't think it makes a big difference whether he's level 5 or level 12 for his tier placement. Another big thing about Gonzalez is that he's big. He's so big that you can't carry him around with all your units. I think, I don't remember exactly what the benchmarks are, but I think a promoted male paladin like Alan cannot carry promoted Gonzalez, and might not even be able to carry an unpromoted Gonzalez, but I'm not like 100% sure on the numbers here. But I remember that being an issue, and that makes him hard to like keep up with your main squad. If you're moving at the pace of like Roy, just moving across like 5 moves at a time, that's obviously not a problem for you. But sometimes there are situations where you want to pick up and drop Gonzalez somewhere else to speed up the map a little bit. One cool thing Gonzalez has is peak walking as both brigands, but especially as a berserker. He can move onto mountaintops, and for example, a wyvern comes up to him, he can just smack him in the face. And the wyvern doesn't get the terrain bonuses, but he does, so he gets like 30 avoid or 40 avoid, depending on what terrain he's standing on, and some defense as well, rubber triangle. So he's like unhittable there. Very useful in chapter 21 in particular. Garrett can do the same thing at base, but he doesn't double as much. He might crit, but Gonzalez is like gonna double and crit people to death. The difference between an unpromoted Gonzalez and a promoted one is staggering combat-wise, because I think he gets like 5 skill in promotion and he doubles reliably, and then he gets the plus 30 crit. So his reliability goes from I'm probably gonna double maybe, and I might just land 1 hit, to I'm gonna double and I'm probably gonna land at least 1 hit, and that hit is probably gonna crit and you're dead. And then it has more accuracy too. Like, he's so much better promoted than unpromoted that I just read the early promotion. Unfortunately, his accuracy before promotion is kind of not worth putting up with, and he's not very useful for faster playthroughs, but casually I think he's a fine unit, and I would like at least put him somewhere in the C tier. I'm gonna ruin another thing here. I would say he's around Garrett's level, really. Which one is better depends on, like, do you want to judge characters for how much utility they bring in for free, or how much potential they have when you do bring them up? Because when Garrett joins, obviously Gonzalez is going to be better if you trained him, but if you haven't used Gonzalez at all, then Garrett is going to be much better. So if you only use Gonzalez when he's useful for like no investments, then he's obviously going to be pretty bad, because he's just not that good without investments, whereas Garrett is. So that kind of depends on how you treat him. I'm okay with him being on par with Lot and Trek. That's usually the spot where he ended up classically whenever I saw like older tier lists, and I do think his combat is significantly better than someone like you or Ray. So, and I think it's also worth a tier over Geese combat wise. A lot of people like compare Gonzalez and Geese and they go like, oh, Geese is more balanced. But the thing with Geese is balance doesn't really like give you any bonus points in battle. Enemy's gonna be not gonna be like, oh my god, you're so balanced, I'm not gonna attack you. Like, it just doesn't work like that. Gonzalez stands out in some important stats like HP, strength, and speed, and the HP gives him bulk mostly. Whereas Geese, he has like more skill, but not so much that he becomes reliable at hitting stuff, for example. So I think the lopsided approach that Gonzalez takes is just better. I do think that sometimes Geese can be better if you want to rescue drop your Berserker around, but in that case you might as well use Garrett, right? Because he also has lower con than Gonzalez. Then there's Chlorine, the first mounted healer you get. Not the only one in this game, but she is the first mounted healer that you do get in Chapter 3. Famously, she is immune to enemies in her joining chapter, at least all enemies that start on the map, so not reinforcements, and also she can be attacked by Eric, who's on the throne. So enemies will just ignore her, which is kind of cool. After that, you know, mounted healer, can't really go wrong with that. Her magic is pretty awful. I think people used to Priscilla, get into Chlorine, might be kind of surprised at how little magic she gets. I think her base is like 2 or something, and her growth like 30%. I think on my first playthrough in FE6, I actually RNG abused to make her magic better, because I just hated the idea of having a low magic healer. Nowadays I know better, thankfully. I know that it doesn't matter. The healing utility, I mean, I don't think I have to get into it too much, because I kind of went over how useful it is with Saul. The other thing that Chlorine is like known for is the dodge tanking ability. Her speed growth and luck growth are both very good, and she gets full avoid supports because I think she has a thunder affinity, and she can support both Deke and Rutger, two very well liked and very good characters, for even more avoid, because they also have avoid boosting affinities. They are slow supports though, except for the Rutger one. It's all very slow. Like that support triangle is not a very fast one, but if you're support abusing or if you're playing really slowly, you can get it up to pretty high levels early on, and then she just dodges everything. Doing that before she is grown into, you know, a very dodgy character is a little risky though. It's not very optimal, first of all, because she's just not capable of counterattacking until she promotes and gets anima magic. And also, it's just, she's very fragile. Like, her HP and defense are obviously garbage, being a healer. So you kind of don't want to rely on it too much. But I remember, like, late game, with the support triangle intact and everything, she can dodge a lot of shit and deal lots of damage. I think on my first playthrough, I actually got her to use her caliber. which, to give you an idea, I think it's B rank anima. She starts with E rank after promotion. So sure, she doubles every round, so she's getting 2 weapon XP per level per combat, but that's still a lot of fire uses that I went through to get her there. But hey, totally worth it, because an 8 move unit with 1-2 range at 1 rounds enemy wyverns in chapter 21 that dodges everything is super worth. It was very fun, but I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. But her rescue drop utility and her healing utility is really what sells her, I think. You can make a case for her being worse than Cecilia with no investment, but I think the availability and the potential that she has does put her over these characters overall. So I want to put her like, I know about like a whole tier. The A- is kind of empty, I know. I don't think she's as good as these units over here. Her staff utility is not as good as them because her staff rank is lower. I think she joins with D rank staffs, and I don't think she has the time to get to warp rank in time to do that. But the amount makes her like really good. I kind of want to do this, honestly, because she does just provide like so much support. If there's a turn where she can't heal, she can still like rescue drop people around. So there's always something for her to do, and that I think is a really distinguishing trait for these kinds of characters. So yeah, that's Chlorine for you. And there's Boars, and I think the first thing I want to mention about Boars is that Project Ember made him a lot better. Apparently, generals and knights can use a lot more different weapon types, so kind of like Draug from FE1, he can use swords, and it helps him out a lot. But in vanilla, you know, which is what we're rating, he only uses lances in an early game filled with axes and weapon triangle, so that hurts his accuracy quite a bit. I think early on there's a good chance he doesn't get doubled, but at some point there will be enemies that double him, and that's going to hurt his durability quite a bit. He does have a good speed growth for an armor knight. I believe his speed growth is higher than his defense growth, and it's just his bases that, you know, make him an armor knight, basically. But it's not going to help him too much in the long term, I think. I did use Boars on my first playthrough. He's actually the reason why I wrote in one of my very, very bad FE6 FAQ guides, things on Game Facts. You can still find it if you want to. That generals are one of the best classes in the game, and people still hold that over my head sometimes. I know better now, thankfully, but I too used to be terrible at Fire Emblem. Or maybe I still am. I don't know. But either way, it's an armor knight. I don't think I need to explain why I don't like armor knights too much. Just one less move than most characters. Still pretty heavy terrain penalties. Pretty bad speed, so they don't never one-round anything. And the durability advantage just kind of gets negated by the fact that they get doubled. Armor Slayers sometimes pop up and kill you. And magic is also a pretty big issue for him. Accuracy is a pretty big issue for him. He's locked to the 2 worst accuracy weapon types. And a lot of people make up for that by like double attacking, but Boars doesn't really double attack very much. So I'm gonna have to put him in like E tier with Wolt, I think. I would say Wolt is overall more useful because his chip can be done without much of a counter effect. You know, he doesn't get countered, so you can attack with him without him impeding too much on your thing. But when Boars attacks, it sometimes takes up a spot of someone like Alan or Lance to be able to attack, and I think that hurts you a bit more. You also just don't want this guy to find an enemy face too much. I think he's decent against like fighting soldiers, but even there, like someone like Lot or Wade does a lot better because they have a shot at doubling and they have weapon triangle still. So the durability aspect of them is still fine, but yeah, he can, like the fact that he can sometimes 1-by-1 soldiers is like a saving grace, and I use that term very, very loosely here. Boars, you know, not very good, but he does have a funny name. He does have a funny name. I think whoever submitted him, that was let's see. I think Lucas mentioned that. He had a funny name. That's why we're submitting him. So yeah, if it was a name tier list, funny name tier list, he probably goes like up here somewhere around with Milady. But that is not the case. Next up is Mernus. Very interesting submission. I did consider almost not tiering it, but I think it's too funny not to do it. So we might as well put him in there somewhere. We're rating all the Fire Emblem characters, and he's technically playable. He's just so weird because he's the only character in the game that doesn't actually become unavailable and dies when he's killed. Same thing as an FE7, but a little different. You do have to use the deployment slot here. It's sometimes worth it. I've seen people stream a lot of FE6 Iron Mans ever since, like, for a while now. And sometimes when a hairy situation comes up and, you know, you're in danger, you can't kill all the enemies in range, you, like, missed a crucial hit or you overlooked an enemy. And it's like, alright, it's time to sacrifice Mernus. And the enemy just goes for Mernus because he's a wagon that doesn't counter with very low HP and defenses because he like never levels up in FE6 if you're playing normally. You would have to dodge 100 hits to level up. I've done it once. It was very gratifying, but I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. So Mernus is a pretty good sacrifice, and I've seen Donda use it in his 0% growth runs as well, just sacrificing Mernus. Also doing convoy warps is very good. Actually having the choice where you deploy your convoy can sometimes be really helpful. Doing things like, for example, in the Zephiel chapter, you can use warp on one side to get someone across the wall, and then you have that another character take the warp staff and open up a chest, and then with a full inventory, and send the warp to the convoy. And on the other side, you got Murnus, and someone just takes the warp staff out of the convoy and uses it on another character. And you can warp twice in a turn without even using a dancer. That's pretty good. Like on different side of the maps too. That's pretty cool. So stuff like that makes Murnus really neat, and a very outstanding character. But it's hard to really warrant putting him over anyone, because he doesn't fight or staff. He just, like, he doesn't even do anything himself. It's other people who do things for him. Like, sure, you can visit the village and everything, but like, how the fuck do you rate that shit? It's so weird. I would say, like, the fact that he's immortal, we're gonna, like, we have to use it to his advantage, right? We can't just discount the fact that he doesn't die, that he plays on casual mode. We have to count that. So he can't be bad. Like, he's a pretty bad use of a deployment slot most of the time. There's only a couple chapters where you actually want to deploy Murnus. He's pretty good when you do, but most of the time it just doesn't exist. So I think, like, C tier should be the best we can give him, right? And arguably it should be D tier. There's maybe like 5 times, maybe 10 times in the whole playthrough generally where you're going to use Murnus, right? So I think a D tier, I think this is the place where I'm going to put him. He's not good. Like, if you're mostly useful as a sacrifice, I think that says a lot about your actual utility on the map. I think most chapters you will go by without using Murnus, without even deploying him. But his utility is pretty unique, and it's something you're not going to get elsewhere. And it's actually pretty useful when you do want to use it. Like, when it's useful, it's super useful and super cool. And then sacrifice utility is mostly relevant for, like, Iron Mans and stuff. So yeah, we're gonna go with the D tier for him. Let me know what you think. This is the character in FE6 that I think has the most curious tiering of all. There was, like, actually linked that once somewhere. There was actually a a Serenus Forest debate, I think, with people getting super heated over whether they should tier FE7 Murnus, which is fucking hilarious. I'm gonna see if I still have it somewhere. Maybe should make a video of it sometime. It was really fucking great. People got really heated over whether Murnus should be on an FE7 tier. Not where he was at on the list. It was just whether he should be tiered or not. That was a heated debate. People really need better things to do, man. I say, as I'm tiering every single Fire Emblem character. Okay. Let's move on to Thea. Thea's a flyer. People sometimes try to trigger me by telling me she's better than Shanna because she has Harpman bonuses. Trust me, if I got triggered by that, I would not be on the internet anymore. I made a proto waifu episode on Shanna a long time ago. It was Fire Emblem Pitfalls number 6, and I argued that Shanna was not just better than Tate or Thea, but better than, like, everyone else, like almost everyone else in FE6. And I stand by most of the content in that episode. So if you want, like, an elaborate analysis on, like, the two Pegasus Knights being compared, I recommend that. I'm gonna focus on, like, Thea in a vacuum here, or, like, in the grand context of FE6. So she joins during the Western Isle arc, and with D rank lances and pretty lackluster base stats. In normal mode, Thea has atrocious base stats. She's only acceptable in hard mode because she gets a tiny bonus to them with the Harpman bonuses, but even those don't make her, like, very good. I don't believe she doubles very reliably. I think the only thing she can, like, one-round KO is, like, a Cavalier when using a Horse Slayer, and that's if she gets, like, a promotion, because I remember, like, Don doing that in his 0% growth run of this game. She can't even use the Axe Reaver, which is very sad. In the Western Isles, you know, Reaver weapons are already not very good because they only reverse the triangle and give you, like, a 1 boost instead of the double weapon triangle boost you get in FE7. So they're not that good here, but she can't even use it. And the same goes for Killer Lance. She's probably not going to be able to use the Killer Lance unless you double 25 times or something. Like, you get, like, 20 rounds of combat with her before chapter 13, because that's when you can buy Killer Lances, or you promote her. And if you promote her, the problem with promoting her early is that one of the big reasons that Thea can be somewhat good is just being unleveled and getting a lot of levels. And she joins, like, level 8 or level 9, I believe. So if you level her up, like, once or twice and then promote her, she's going to be stuck with her awful bases. You kind of need her growth for her to become good long term. It's not a big problem for Shanna because her base speed and growth are so good that even if you promote her at, like, level 11 or 12 or even 10, she's going to be able to double. But I don't think Thea is that lucky. And her strength is, like, her one selling point over Shanna and, like, over other characters, is that she has, like, an okay strength base. It's actually not actually good. It's just, like, her base is, like, equal to what Shanna have if you like, early promote her. And that's not very good. It's like 8 or something, like maybe 10 max. So it's not great, but it's something, I guess. But she still doesn't, like, 2-round KO people or 2-hit KO people. And sometimes she also doesn't double, because again, look at normal mode, and I'm gonna look up her base right now for normal mode. It's so bad, it's hilariously bad, and I laugh every time someone brings up like she's good because she has harbor bonuses, because she doesn't. And she has like that's the other thing people bring up. She has a 40% strength growth. I don't remember when I thought people hated 4% growth, but apparently when it comes to Thea, they don't. When it comes to her, they don't hate it as much. Yeah, so normal mode Thea has 6 base strength. It's 9 on hard mode according to Transforced. And her base speed on normal mode is 11. 11 base speed and 6 base strength in the Western Isles, like near the end of it too. Like near the end of chapter 11 in the A route. It's disgustingly bad. And then defense is kind of good actually. It's 7 too. But this 6 base strength. That's let me compare it to someone. That's 1 better than Lance in chapter 1. That's 1 worse than Alan. It's 1 worse than Lots. It's 1 worse than Rutger in normal mode. It's holy god, it's so bad. It's equal to Fear in normal mode. It is so freaking terrible how bad her strength is. It's really bad. Even like 9 strength isn't very good. So yeah, I think she's like the poster child of why harbor bonuses alone don't carry a unit. They're just bonuses. They're added to your original stats. Besides that though, she flies. Like obviously she flies, and flying is good. And being able to rescue drop people at least is worth some points. And she can become like a reasonably good Falcon Knight if trained. Not terrible, but definitely not worth using a whole lot. And if you have to use her, you're probably going to be like really annoyed with her like actual combat. But her class is obviously great. You just have to be a little careful. I think she misses out on a lot of flying utility that Shanna had, so she has to be a couple tiers below, I think. I'm going to put her like in the B- tier. I think that's like about as generous as it gets. Like around here somewhere, and I could see her being worse, honestly. There's definitely spots where you want to deploy her even if you haven't trained her. Most notably the desert chapter, help you fly over, and she helps you get to Ilya if you train her, which is also nice. You can like use Shin and Thea and you'll still go to Ilya. That's pretty good. So yeah, that's what I think of Thea. So, might as well show you what we have left of all the games. So this is what we've got left of FE6. It's quite a bit still. Not like half the characters, but still quite a bit of them. So plenty of choices there. Remember to double check whether your submission has been submitted already or not to avoid duplicates. There's only 1 in this whole batch, so it's less of a problem than last episode, thankfully. So we have those for FE6. Like I said, Alba is the only character left for FE5. Very fitting because he's also the character I left behind for escape chapters in my Iron Man's as a tradition. So kind of a funny callback there that Alba is the last one to escape not being tiered. FE4, only 8 characters left. 7 if we don't include Arion, we really shouldn't. So just these 7. FE3, we have a bunch left actually. Including Angry Marth and a bunch of bosses, but still quite a bit even if we discount those. So like 3 rows full of characters left for FE3. And then for FE2, we also have most of them left, but that's because like Gaiden started being tiered pretty late. So the people who like Gaiden have only had the chance to submit them for like 2 or 3 batches, I think. FE1, I'm going to add it probably for next batch because I've been playing it. I'm probably going to finish it by the time next submissions go up. So yeah, expect 2 more of these videos this month for the next batches. We're going to do FE7 onwards, and I will see you happy and healthy next time, probably in the new year. Peace around, goodbye, and thank you so much for the support.